Hello, everyone.
Hey there, guys. This is Rita.
This is Amanda, and you're listening to I Don't Know Her.
I tried.
The podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of, but you should have.
And you will today.
So yesterday, we're actually recording on a Monday, which feels weird.
It feels really weird, but there are no days anymore.
But we took Sunday off so that Rita especially could enjoy her Mother's Day.
Which I did. It was very nice. It was nice to just have a day to just flop.
Yeah, we got up. So our son moved back in with us this weekend. He was our foster son when he was quite a young boy, and we've remained in his life since then, even though he's lived with his bio dad. And he's a senior in high school, and he's really struggling during this pandemic to accomplish everything he needs to get done for graduation, for AP testing, for his online classes. So we just were like, you're 18 now, you can move if you want, so come in. And he said, I want to come. So he's here. So that meant that we got to have Mother's Day brunch together, which was really fun and nice.
That is really nice. And I am really happy that he did move in. I remember senior year. It's so overwhelming. Everything that you have to do to get ready.
I think it's overwhelming on a regular time, but he has to do his AP tests from home, which is going to be real weird.
Yeah.
You know, he had to do all of his decision day stuff for UW at home. Yes, he got into the University of Washington.
Yay.
He has all financial aid covered with no loans so far. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really, really good. We picked out his dorm yesterday and got him all signed up for his dorms. And that's just been kind of cool to be able to help him with those kinds of things.
Yeah. What an exciting time too, but what a scary time.
Truly.
Yeah.
There's so much to do. And that's one of the problems is he was just feeling so overwhelmed that he was shutting down, and we've all been there.
Totally. I do that as an adult now, so.
That's what we were giving him, like, lessons on how to clean and do dishes and stuff, because he's going to have to actually, like, do those things and not just half-ass them. They're going to be his job. So we were talking about, it's always good to do your dishes after dinner and just get them done and over with, because if you let them sit, then the next morning you're going to add your breakfast dishes to them. Then you're going to come home from work or school and add your lunch dishes to them. And then by the time you sit down to do them, you've got a mountain of dishes to do.
Yeah.
And it feels overwhelming. And then you're like, I can't do this. I'm going to not do this. And then more dishes get added until you just can't do it.
Until you're eating out of the pan over the sink.
And dishes are a small thing, but it's representative of so much more. So he was really like, yes.
That's awesome. Oh, those little life lessons.
So Rita wanted to share with you guys today a little bit about how she became a mom. So I just shared how we became parents to our son. How about you?
Oh.
How did Eastside come about?
Well, when a man and a woman kind of know each other.
Tell me more about this heterosexual coupling.
Mother's Day is always a really tricky day for me. When I first became a mom, I was 22, very young, I feel, to be a mom. I mean,
really
young. So when me and my husband met, we started dating for about maybe a month or two, I think. And we had a very fast and furious relationship. And it was, honestly, we were like having sex in his car. We were like, it was fun. I was having fun. I was being 21. And I was a person at that time that wasn't looking for love. I had decided that I never wanted to be married. And I decided for myself that I never wanted kids because I didn't want to accept. That's a big responsibility to accept a human life into your life and say, okay, I'm going to take care of it. So I just didn't want to do that. And so I kind of ghosted him and we stopped talking for a couple months. And I was at work one day and felt a little funky. And I was like, I wonder if it's because I'm going to get my period. And I was like, well, I haven't got my period. And like my pupils dilated. I was like, for 3 months. And I was like, oh shit. Ran across the street to the grocery store, the Rite Aid that was across the street, took a pregnancy stall in a took a pregnancy test in a bathroom stall at work at the pizza place that I was working at. And the first one came out all blurry. And I was like, well, maybe, I'm not. And so I was like, woo, and went back to work. And you know how there's like 2 of them in the box? Like 2 pregnancy tests.
Are there?
There are. And so I was like, well, I'm going to take the second one just to be sure. So I took the second one and it was a big, sharp, perfectly pink plus mark. And I was like, oh, shit. And I was like, okay. So I left work that day and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I hadn't talked to him in months. I didn't know what he was up to anymore. He didn't know what I was up to anymore. So I just decided for myself, well, I'm going to have this baby. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to drag him into this. So I actually went quite far in my pregnancy, and it was getting towards the end where I was like, I can't do this and not have him know that he's going to have a child. Like, that's just not fair. So I wrote him a letter. This is how mature I was back then. I hated confrontation. And I was like, hey, just letting you know, if you want to be there, cool. If you don't, cool. But this is I just needed to let you know. And on his end, he described receiving that letter and like all of the room went dark for a quick second. But then he snapped out of it and he was like, well, I got to talk to her. I got to find her. So he went to call me, and at that same time, my phone had broken. So he was calling me and couldn't get a hold of me. So he actually started calling hospitals because he thought maybe I was in labor, because I was very far in my pregnancy. I was about 8 months.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So
he's got like 3 weeks to get used to the idea of becoming a father.
Yeah. So he was calling hospitals looking for me, finally got a hold of me through my sister's phone. We met up for dinner, and I come waddling up 8 months pregnant, and he's just, the first thing he said was, why didn't you tell me? So I told him. And then the second thing he said was, well, what do you need me to do? And then we just took it from there. And it was a very, very rocky start. Like, I didn't even tell my father till I was about 7 months, maybe 7.5. I didn't start showing till 7 months.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That must have been a mind trip for everybody.
Oh, my mom was upset. Everybody was upset. But I mean, eventually the baby came. Things did work out. But, I don't have that perfect mom story. I always wish that I had maybe done things differently. But, I mean, you can't go back and change it. But it's still a very, like my husband always says, we have a really fun story.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is no such thing as a perfect mother or a perfect story. Usually Mother's Day for me is a pretty awful day, at least for the last 4 years, as I've not had my mother in my life. And we just had a very fraught relationship. And of course we have friends who've lost mothers through various reasons, or whose mothers disowned them or cut off contact. And I know that is just a hard day for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you're a mother who's there for your child and is doing her best. And I think that your son will always know and remember that.
I hope so. When I was saying that Mother's Day is hard for me, it's like I always felt like I hadn't earned that title in a way, because the beginning of when I was pregnant and when I was telling my parents and telling my siblings, everybody was pissed. And my mother especially, she really I mean, she told me a lot of things that I know she probably wishes she could take back. But it really made me feel like ashamed that I was pregnant, especially coming from my Catholic background. I'm the youngest child. I'm the youngest daughter out of 4 girls, and I was the first one to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of culturally, it's not something I bet my mother wanted for me. So I always had like Mother's Day. I always felt uncomfortable, and I always felt like I didn't want any attention, like I didn't deserve it.
Do you still feel that way?
A little bit. Like, I don't want to cause a fuss. I don't want to. When I first started doing Mother's Day, we did the whole going out to brunch and the gifts and things like that. And I don't really enjoy that. Yesterday we stayed home and I had a nice quiet day, and that to me is just that's good. That's what works for me.
Yeah. I have a friend whose number one wish was to be left alone. So her partner took the kids and left.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's like, well, what do you need? What do you need?
Yeah.
And what I needed was sleep and some chicken fried steak. So that's what I got yesterday.
Yeah. When you talked about like the struggle of when you told people, I remember when Abby told her mom that we were going to become foster parents.
Yeah.
And we thought our mom would be excited for us. And she was eventually, but at the beginning, her first response was, "Why would you do that?" And then her next response was, "Well, what business do either of you guys have raising children?"
Yikes. It's those things, those words, they hurt.
And yeah, she was like, "You guys don't have any experience." And I was like, "What? First off, what mother has experience before having children?"
Yeah.
2, I had been a teacher for a decade. And 3, Abby had been a teacher and a camp leader for like 6 years. Like we actually did have experience with children. If that's like a qualification you must have in order to be a mom, which obviously it isn't. So, that was really rough,
Yeah.
those first couple of months, especially. And then you have like, you gave birth to Isai, and Isai's always lived with you. Like, there is a part of me who thinks we're fake moms. I don't actually feel like that. And I would never tell another foster parent that, but it always just kind of felt like, oh, well, we're not really moms,
Why do you feel that? Like, where do you think that comes from?
Well, because one, he didn't come into our life until he was 13. So those first 12 years of his life, we weren't a part of that. And 2, he didn't live with us after that. Of course, as I mentioned, we've been involved in his life since then and doing our best to be somewhat of a parent to him since then. But yeah, I mean, it's like we're not involved in everyday decisions every single day of his life. So, and to me, that's what a mom does.
I know some moms who gave birth, and it might as well have been, this kid should have been born in a bear trap, because those are not good mothers.
Well, that is real interesting that you're going to say that, because I think I should go first today, because I have a pretty intense mother-daughter story.
Let's hit it.
Have you ever heard of Juli Furtado?
No, I have not.
She was one of the world's first female professional mountain bikers.
Okay. I love mountain biking, by the way.
So Juliana Furtado was born on March 4th, 1967 in New York City. So she's not terribly old, obviously. Her father was a jazz pianist and singer named Tommy Furtado, and he was pretty well known in Manhattan. He had actually played with Frank Sinatra He had sang the national anthem at Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a pretty big deal. Her mother was a former ballet dancer, and her name was Nina Armagh. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Armagh.
Yeah,
Armagh.
Armagh.
So her father was actually, I believe, originally Portuguese. And in fact, one place I read said something about Juliana having been born on the San Miguel Islands. I'm not sure. But then everything else said she was born in New York. So I assume that that's the correct information. So Julie had 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. And Nina had reportedly given up her career as a dancer to be a mother, to raise these 3 children. But when Julie was young, her parents' relationship was very ugly. And they actually ended up splitting up. And Julie described their split as a violent divorce.
Ooh.
And when Julie was 6 years old, Nina uprooted the children and moved them from New Jersey to Londonderry, Vermont, which was a tiny town in the Green Mountains. Like, tiny. I actually looked it up just to see, and the population was like 1,700.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I grew up in a town of 1,500, so I cannot relate.
It seems like she wanted to get pretty far away and pretty...
Yeah, definitely
isolated.
Far away, far from him. And their home life was awful. Their mother was a pretty emotionally abusive person. It didn't ever really say anything about her being physically abusive, but she was very verbally and emotionally abusive to the children. Julie actually recalled a story about age 7, that something her mom did that would stick with her for her whole life. When she was 7 years old, her mother told her and her siblings that she was going to kill herself. And when she did, it was going to be the children's fault because they were ruining her life.
Yikes.
Yeah. She told
That's
a 7-year-old this. So Julie believed that her mother's hatred towards the children was because of the marriage that had produced them. In fact, Julie said this in an Outside magazine article in 1995. She was always down, and she hated us kids because we came from that horrible marriage. To feel hated by your mother, ugh. So to try to escape her mother, Julie actually started skiing at a young age in those Green Mountains in Vermont. And it turned out she had a very natural athletic ability and a really great natural talent at skiing itself. And by the time she entered high school, she was racing in some of the with some of the most skilled skiers on the racing circuit.
Wow.
And Julie's mother would follow her everywhere because Julie was now a star.
So now she's got some use for her.
Yeah, but here's a pretty sad story about this. So she followed her on all of her ski races, even though Julie would travel with the team, like her mom would show up and she wouldn't even tell her she was coming. And most of the time you would think that's great. Like her mom was there to support her and was proud of her. And in some ways that was true. But when Julie was done with all of her races, like she could barely get done with people like hugging her and congratulating her before people were like, Julie, your mom's looking for you. Julie, your mom's looking for you. Julie, your mom's looking for you. And when she would finally find her mom would tell her, quote, what a worthless person I was.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So not letting her enjoy that moment of completion, of succeeding at something.
Well, and it seemed to me that her mom was intentionally wanting to burst her bubble.
Yeah.
And despite this horrific verbal abuse and insults all the time, Julie actually continued to excel. And she was offered a spot at the Stratton Mountain School Ski Academy, which was a prestigious ski school and college prep school. And actually, by the time Julie was 15 years old, she made the U.S. national ski team, the youngest member to do so.
Wow.
The New York Post wrote this about Julie. I have seen the future of U.S. skiing, and its name is Juli Furtado.
Oh, that's awesome.
So she was like becoming a household name by the time she was a teenager. And she was very much expected to make the '88 Olympics team. So she traveled all over the world with the U.S. ski team, and she was competing all over at the top level, like beating skiers who had more experience and had more accolades and medals, and she was beating them. But Juli pushed herself really, really hard. And if she felt pain, she would push through it. She would keep training. And she overtrained. And throughout the next 5 years, between the ages of 15 and 21, she would undergo 6 knee reconstructions.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Yeah, we're not talking about like a little stuff here, a little stuff there. Her whole knee being reconstructed 6 times. So Juli was offered, once she was finishing high school, she was offered a scholarship to attend the University of Colorado in Boulder. And she jumped at the chance to leave. Right?
Yeah.
You can imagine. She packed up her car, and with this, she actually purchased the car with winnings she'd gotten from some of her races. She packed it up and she headed west. And she actually told a story about how she'd met a girl on the skiing circuit who competed against her and who lived in Vail, Colorado. And so she was stopped at payphone on the way to Colorado and was like, "Hey, remember how you said I could come visit you sometime? I have nowhere to live. Can I come be with you?"
Yeah, that's so oh my gosh.
Because she just needed to get out of her house.
Yeah.
As her knee injuries kept sidelining her in skiing, her physical therapist recommended that she try riding a bike that would help her heal but still stay in shape. As soon as she got on a bike, she fell in love with cycling. While her knee injuries inevitably forced her into early retirement from skiing, that same year she started to train as a competitive cyclist. And by the end of her last season of skiing in 1989, Juli won the Road Cycling National Championships.
Wow.
Like, this woman was like top-notch athlete. And Juli loved road cycling. It was great. It was fun. But it was, to her, kind of boring. She was used to being on skis and going down complicated technical trails on mountains.
She just needed a little more stimulation.
Yeah, and being in the mountains was really where she felt at home. Like, that was her place. And around that same time, there was this new style of biking that was becoming very popular in Colorado, mountain biking. So Juli decided to give it a shot. And within the first year of just trying mountain biking, within the first year of ever putting her ass in the seat, she ended up winning the 1990 Cross Country World Championships, which crowned her the first women's world champion in mountain biking.
Awesome.
Within the fucking first 6 months. So in 1991, that was her first full season as a competitive mountain biker, and she immediately dominated the sport, taking first in almost every competition she entered. But Juli was still dealing with the demons from her childhood, obviously mostly coming from the way her mother had treated her.
Yeah.
By the way, her mother followed her to Colorado.
No!
Yeah.
What the fuck?
After her younger brother turned 18, her mom picked up and moved to Colorado to be around Juli. And Juli was having none of it.
That's crazy.
In fact, Juli had cut off almost all contact with her mother. And Juli was an incredibly self-conscious racer. Like, she would always pick at herself and find all of the things she did wrong and see herself as not a good racer. And one of her competitors said this of her: "Juli's been doing the doom and gloom thing as long as I've known her. It's a weird negative energy that would probably kill most of us. But for Juli, it works." She took all of those insults her mom always lobbed at her and internalized that.
Yeah.
And that competitors, for most people that would kill us, but for her it was motivation. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's the only way she learned how to be motivated.
To yeah.
And it hurt my heart.
Yeah.
To hear that. And she really was negative. And this was her actual tactic. Like most racers, you're actually told to do this. And I know you've probably done this as a marathon runner. Like you visualize yourself running and doing well and not having any problems and being able to manage your breath. And so like she would, instead of visualizing herself winning, she would visualize everything that could possibly go wrong. Her derailleur falling off, her tire going flat. If she got 2 flat tires, she was out. It wouldn't even happen. She was going to trip on, like she was going to hit that rock and go flying off. She was going to break her leg. Like that's what she would visualize at the starting line.
Wow.
But for whatever reason, that seemed to work.
Well, she's like, that sounds like survival to me, which is something that she probably did with her mother when she was in her mother's house, was how to survive. Is she going to be pissed today? Is she going to take a swing at me? Is she going to be in a good mood? Is she going to be in a bad mood?
Yeah, that uncertainty, like I have to prepare for the worst in order to feel safe. So in 1992, Juli Furtado became the downhill world champion and a 2-time cross-country World Cup runner-up. So she was just going up and up in the sport. And in 1993, she achieved what was called and still is called the streak with all capitals. She placed first in international or national races, including winning all 6 of the nationals and 9 out of 10 World Cup races. By the end of that year, she had racked up 17 first-place finishes in 18 events.
Holy crap.
Yeah, she dominated. Like, no one was even close.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe exactly how famous she was, because she'd been famous as a skier, a young skier, had been, in ESPN, had been in the New York Post, had been profiled, and now switching sports immediately became the top competitor. She was legit famous. Like, you know how when Tony Hawk became a big skateboarder, even if you didn't know what skateboarding was, and you would know who Tony Hawk was? Mm-hmm. So at the time, Juli was making nearly $400,000 a year. We're talking 1993, 94.
Yeah.
Lucas, I need you to tell me $400,000. I mean, the 90s were a pretty good time, so maybe it's pretty like even with now, but she was pulling in almost $400,000 a year plus 19 corporate sponsorships.
Whoa. That's so much more money.
So $400,000 in 1994 would be what now, Lucas?
$400,000 in 1994 is the equivalent of $698,491.63 today.
So she was obviously making pretty good money. She was really famous. In fact, when she was out and about, people would always want to take photos with her. She actually even got quite a few marriage proposals.
Oh, jeez.
And once while she was racing in Italy, there were these men who were chasing her, trying to give her flowers while she was racing. And she was truly a marvel. Like, she really had made it. And she felt really obligated to be a model for girls in this sport. She took that pretty seriously. But Juli's biggest dream and her most sought after goal was the one that she'd had when she was young and she couldn't do. She wanted to get to the Olympics. Because when she was on the U.S. ski team, she was supposed to, but then her knee prevented her from being able to go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
So Juli wanted to be in the Olympics, and this was about the time when this was a sport that was being added to the Olympics. So it was a real achievable dream for her. And since she was at the top of the field, it was like a no-brainer. She would be the one who would go, and she would be the one who would win. So Juli won the mountain biking national championship again in 1994. But in 1995, things started to go wrong. She noticed that her energy was waning and training was becoming more and more difficult. She was getting fatigued faster. She was in more pain. She was legit like her body just wasn't able to do some of the things that she had always been able to do. She knew something was wrong. even though still, despite this, like she was still performing at the top level and most people still couldn't touch her, she knew she wasn't performing up to her own ability. And it seemed like there was no reason. Like her performance was just declining and she just couldn't figure out why. And it was in that same year, 1995, that Juli's mother finally made good on her threat from Juli's childhood. She killed herself that February.
Oh, geez.
The two of them had been pretty estranged for quite a while, but her mother's death was a huge deal. And of course, it unearthed some of the darker parts of her past that she had suppressed. In fact, even though she'd been a pretty private person the entire time she'd been famous, she started bringing up her mother's death in really random places. Like she was at this benefit dinner at Spago in West Hollywood, which is like this huge, and there were celebrities everywhere, and it was like a $500 a plate dinner. And it was for the U.S. Cycling Federation. She was given some kind of award, some achievement award, and she got up to do a speech. And she talked about her mother's death for like 5 minutes.
Oh, geez.
And it was just like sort of rambling, and everybody was awkward and nobody knew exactly what to do. And then she also published a 2-page letter to her mother in Mountain Bike magazine that she had read at the funeral.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of mixed emotion of like not knowing how to process and not knowing how to talk about it.
Yeah, it seems like she just had no idea like what was the appropriate place and time for this.
Mm-hmm.
Julie told a reporter that she felt she had to do something for her mother. She said, "She was proud of my mountain biking. I know that now. She was really proud of me, but I never let her share in anything of my life. She kind of died not knowing me at all." Yeah.
That's rough.
So this is not great. And Julie knew that if she wanted to make it to the Olympics, she needed to like box this up and not deal with it. And after all, again, this is her second shot at going there after having missed out on the 88 Olympics because of her knee. So Julie was training and she did manage to qualify for the 1996 Olympic team. And she was considered the favorite to win this new mountain biking category. And Julie got there, but she was tired. It felt like her bones themselves were tired. And she was trying, and she pushed herself in the race. But she came in a disappointing 10th place. Her body just couldn't do what she needed and wanted it to do. So when she came back from the Olympics, she knew it was time to see a doctor. And she started seeing somebody, I believe, in California. Even though she lived in Colorado, she had some friends in California. And she was like, I think initially maybe she saw somebody in Colorado and they diagnosed her with Lyme disease, which can be a pretty debilitating disease. But most of the time with medication and time, you have a full recovery. But by the end of 1997, it was clear that there was something more going on with Julie. And that's when she started seeing some California doctors and got a final diagnosis that would change her career forever. In 1997, Julie was diagnosed with systemic lupus.
Oh.
Which is a chronic autoimmune disease that my sister has.
Mm-hmm.
Lupus attacks the skin, the joints, the kidneys, basically all of your internal organs, and a lot more. It's not curable. It can be managed with medication. And most importantly, you have to be able to manage your external stress, because becoming anxious or stressed.
Yes, stress is a big factor.
Yeah. If you become anxious or stressed, it can cause a flare up. Like my sister, when I was in my freshman or sophomore year of college, and she had 3 young children and her marriage was not doing well, she had the worst flare up, I think, of her life. And she ended up having to be hospitalized, ended up in the ICU. And it's because her liver was failing. Her body had determined that her liver was a foreign object and it was trying to expel it from her body. And it attacked her so badly that she ended up being on the liver transplant list. She was completely jaundiced, and they eventually were able to like reset her body and not have to replace her liver, but it was touch and go for a while. And it's a wild disease. It's so unpredictable.
It is.
And that's what was eating away at her body, was lupus. And after that diagnosis, Juli announced her retirement from mountain biking in November of 1997. She was just 30 years old.
Oh, geez.
Right? Like, women hit their athletic peak in their 30s.
Yeah.
So she would have still been able to dominate the sport had she not had lupus.
Yeah.
Leaving behind her athletic career was heartbreaking, obviously, especially because it was the second time that she was forced to leave her athletic profession well before her prime because of her body. Juli also decided it was time to leave Colorado, and she moved permanently to Santa Cruz, California, where she had a good support system of friends who could help her, and there was a really great hospital there for lupus treatments. And as soon as she was out of the spotlight, Juli began to focus on her health, and she was able to manage her flare-ups. She knew she would never return to professional competition, but she did begin to ride bikes for pleasure again. She started on beach cruisers.
Oh, nice. Those are fun.
Juli also began to experiment with bike designs. After having spent years riding around on mountain bikes, she knew that the mountain bikes were obviously all designed for men. Mm-hmm. And so she started working on creating bike frames that were built for women's bodies. Eventually, Santa Cruz Bikes pulled her in to be on staff to make the first line of mountain bikes designed specifically for women, which they called the Juliana.
I like it.
Juli rose in the ranks of the company and actually became the director of grassroots sponsorship and marketing. So things were going pretty well, right? She couldn't compete, but she was still in the same field. She was still, making bikes, helping the sport be more female friendly. And she had obviously managed to sock away a lot of that money. She was actually pretty frugal. And I mean, you're making almost $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
For like 7 years straight or whatever. So she was able to buy a little modest home in Santa Cruz, work on her mountain bike line, and she would trail ride and she would trail run for fun in the mountains. So she was living a pretty good life.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
In 2009 or 8, she gave birth to a son named Wyatt. And it was while raising Wyatt that her long-buried trauma from childhood began to surface. Juliana's older sister, Gia, died by suicide after a lifelong battle with addiction.
Jeez.
And things were bubbling underneath, right? Like, so this is a touch point. She's given birth to her child, so now she's raising a child, and then you know how it is. As you're raising a kid, you think back to the things your mother did or your father did. And so things just started bubbling underneath. But she kept pushing through, of course, the same way she had done with skiing and mountain biking.
Yeah, that's her survival tactic.
And in fact, in 2013, she developed the concept for turning the single Juliana bike frame and its components into a complete line of fully outfitted women's mountain bikes, which was a first for Santa Cruz Bikes, which prior to that had been known primarily as a frame manufacturer instead of a whole bike manufacturer. The line became immediately successful and is one of the world's largest mountain bike ranges in the industry today.
Wow.
Like, you can go, if you just Google Juliana bikes, it's like the first thing that you can buy like 6 different mountain bikes.
Nice.
But just 2 years later, when Wyatt turned 7 in 2015, Juli's past boiled over. She was struck by how innocent and sweet her little boy was at just 7 years old. And she would look at him and see herself at 7 years old and remember what her mother had said to her. And do you remember what the story was? What happened to her when she was 7?
Oh, that's right.
That was the first time, not the last, but the first time her mother told her, I'm going to kill myself and it's going to be your fault.
Mm-hmm.
So she's looking at Wyatt and she's thinking, oh my God, I could never say that to this sweet, innocent, impressionable little boy who I love and adore. How could you do that? And that like little girl pain just came roaring back to life. And in fact, Juli also was just remembering over and over. So Juli had started journaling around, I think she said she was like 13 when she'd started journaling, and she kept journaling her whole adult life. And she remembered when she found her old journal that her mother had once found her journal when she was, I think, 13 or so, and had read it. And in the journal, there was a portion where she shared that same sentiment that her mother said, like, I'm going to kill myself and it's your fault. And when her mother read it, instead of being like, oh my God, I've caused this great pain to my daughter, she got pissed and disowned Juli for having written it down.
Oh, this woman has issues.
So now Juli is just remembering all of this trauma, and it feels new and it's constant. And at the same time that this is happening, she's going through a huge custody battle with Wyatt's father. And now she's like, worried she's going to lose her child. She's having all of this new trauma, like the old trauma that's become new. And she was constantly fighting this anger that she had towards her dead mother and her anxiety. And so this turned into night after night after night of insomnia. She wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping, and she was often crying uncontrollably all the time.
Yikes. It sounds like a nervous breakdown.
The definition of a breakdown. And Juli realized that there were only two ways out. And she was determined to do things differently from her mother and not leave her son feeling like he was the reason. So she checked herself into a treatment center and got help, which recently she said is, quote, probably the thing I'm most proud of in my life. Mm-hmm. After 3 weeks in treatment, Juli emerged with tools to help her manage her trauma and stress. And in 2018, Juli made the decision to tell her story openly after the deaths of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, hoping that shining a light on it would help others. So she talks openly about what the wrong things to say to someone are who's feeling depressed or suicidal. This is what she said. People were trying to be helpful, saying, you're a fighter. You've overcome so much. You'll get through this. Things happen for a reason. It'll get better. As if that's magically going to happen. So when she was asked what she thinks people should say instead of those platitudes that are kind of meaningless and offer no real help, this is what Juli said. I think they should acknowledge, oh my God, you're in a really hard spot and I'm totally here for you. Anything you need. If you look at the suicide rate, it's not going down, it's going up. And I think people just don't even want to accept that somebody might want to kill themselves. I wasn't suicidal. I was in so much pain, but I didn't want to kill myself. I just didn't know what to do. The assumption that I would just get through this was so disheartening to me because I wasn't getting through it. A part of me was just like, if I tried to kill myself, then they would realize the pain I'm in. The thing about people being suicidal is they already feel horrible. And so it's just more acknowledging their pain and not trying to be like, this will get better. I think that's so accurate.
Yeah.
I've personally, and I know you've probably personally experienced that too, where people are just like, pick yourself up. It'll be okay. It'll get better. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't.
The comparison of, you've done this before, you've come through hard times before. But it's like every time you go through that hard time, it's like putting a bag of rocks on your shoulder. And then you go through another hard time and it's another bag of rocks, especially if you're a person that internalizes things and doesn't express them, doesn't process and express them properly, which is like a lot of times of what I used to do, was you just wear it and you wear it. And then guess what? You've got 10,000 pounds on your shoulder and you can't move anymore.
Yeah, she would just be adding and adding to it and not ever taking the load off. Mm-hmm. And so she started talking about this openly, specifically to try to help athletes and young women who are going through these things and survivors of trauma. And she's hoping that her honesty about suicidal ideation will be helpful to them who have trauma or depression looming over them. Juli Furtado continues to impact and inspire the world of sports and beyond. She was inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame and the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame, and she was even in the Guinness Book of World Records for an unmatchable string of consecutive major wins, which she held for nearly a decade.
Wow.
She changed the face of mountain biking and became an advocate for women in sports, as well as an advocate for mental health. Juli still works and lives in Santa Cruz, California, where she builds bikes, rides, and runs the trails. And she also continues to speak out and be a beacon of hope for girls, athletes, abuse survivors, and those who struggle with depression. And that's the story of Juliana Furtado.
It's awesome. What a wonderful way of how the story turned, because it could have gone a whole different way.
Yeah, I like that she realized she was at a crossroads and she could either be her mother or she could choose a different path. And deciding that is the hardest thing in the world. You know, both of those choices feel impossible. Both of them do. They feel impossible and they feel like so hard.
Yeah. I understand her, like, looking at her child and if you look at it and you see yourself, and what would you want to say to that 7-year-old self? What would you want to say to your 10-year-old self? You know, and I do that a lot with my son. I'm like, what did I need at that time?
Yeah. What did I miss that I should have and could have had? So I did get my research from encyclopedia.com and a really cool old article from 1995 on Outside magazine called The Marvelous Manic Drive of Juli Furtado. And then there were a couple of recent ones after she'd started talking about her depression. One of them was mountain biking legend Juli Furtado opens up about battling depression and suicide by Joe Lindsay for Bicycling magazine. A Race Against Suicide, Why This Former Olympian is Opening Up by Daniel Brown for the Mercury News. And then I also used her own website, julianabicycles.com, and Wikipedia.
That was awesome. What a powerful story.
Yeah, I did think it was a little bit of a downer, so I thought it would be better if you had a happier one to end with.
A little bit. I mean, it's real, though. I mean, it's a real situation. I liked it. I liked her story. I liked her willpower.
Yeah, I initially just thought I was going to tell a cool, badass story about a mountain biker. And then when I started digging into her and realized, like, no, this is going to be a story about someone who battled depression and suicide and overcame that and is still out here doing great work for people. And she was a badass mountain biker. And still
I can't wait
is.
to see her bikes. I'm going to look them up.
She's still, they were talking about, like, how the Santa Cruz biking community she's still well known because she still only, like, almost always only bikes with men because she can't, like, the women are not as skilled as she is. And she still, like, tears them up. She just smokes them when they go out on trail rides.
Sounds like a force to be reckoned with.
She clearly was. And I have admiration and respect for people who can look at that crossroads and make the choice to go to treatment, because I think that it's a difficult decision to make either way.
Yeah.
All right. Who do you got?
All right. Today I'm going to talk about Luisa Capetillo.
Tapatio? Like the...
Capetillo. C-A-P-E.
C. I'm sorry. Remember, I'm not hearing you through your microphone. I'm hearing you through your tablet.
Oh, true. Very true.
So I was like, Tapatio? Like the founder of the great hot sauce I love?
Oh, Tapatio, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like. I buy the giant bottle like you guys.
Oh, gosh. The bottle of shame.
Okay, sorry. Luisa Capetillo.
Capetillo.
Okay. I don't know her.
She's a Puerto Rican feminist, anarchist, activist, and labor union leader.
Well, we are racking up the anarchists lately.
So Luisa Capetillo was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico on October 28th, 1879. Her mother's name was Margarita Perón. She was French, and her father was Luis Capetillo, and he was Spanish. Both of her parents immigrated to Puerto Rico at the same time, and they met shortly after. Her father worked as a laborer, and both he and his wife dedicated their time to homeschooling their daughter. So it wasn't just the mom, her father also helps with the homeschooling.
Love that equality there in the marriage.
So lessons that stood out to Luisa was learning about the French Revolution and the workers' rights movement in northern Spain. Both of her parents were deeply influenced by their love of the Romanticism movement. Her mother taught her French, and Luisa dove into French literature. She spoke throughout her writings, she spoke highly of her special and unique relationship with her mother. So we're going to a whole nother spectrum here where this mother and daughter had a very good relationship. Luisa said this about her mother. She said, "To you, dear mother of mine, who never tried to control me or make me think traditionally, you allowed me to inquire freely without forcing me in any way." So way different from...
Yes, that is way different.
Luisa's parents' relationship was unique as well. They had established between each other that they were partners, that they were in a romantic relationship, but they wanted to remain independent from each other. So they decided they never wanted to be married.
Interesting.
This is quite a radical idea for the time.
Yeah, it's like the 1890s, you said?
1879. So yeah, she's 1880s, 1890s.
Yeah, that's a real radical. I mean, it's still pretty radical. People still frown upon that, which is dumb.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a young teen, she grew up amidst a really sharp cultural shift in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico had been acquired as a U.S. territory in 1898, and it was at the end of the Spanish-American War. So the U.S., of course, came in with the attitude of ownership. They wanted to push ultimate authority. They demanded change of the cultural and social structure of Puerto Rico, which was completely unfair to walk in and deem this so for these people.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
yeah.
I have so many thoughts and opinions about the United States colonizing fucking Puerto Rico. It's so terrible.
Yeah. So Luisa's parents were very vocal, and with her, they were like, you question these motherfuckers. Don't take this, sitting down, and don't allow somebody to tell you how to live your own life in your own country. Around the time that she was 18, Luisa became a very young mother. She had 2 children back to back. She had a superior skill in reading and writing. She was and she was multilingual. Which led her to leading a really good job. To support her young family, she got a job as what's called a reader in a cigar-making factory in Arecibo. Overwhelming amount of the workers at the time could not read or write. About 40% of the tobacco workers couldn't read and write, and 87% of the agricultural workers were illiterate. So the American Tobacco Company would hire these readers to read novels and current events to people as they were working.
How odd.
Yeah, it's almost like because they're doing this manual labor, they're like, here's a little treat,
Here's a treat?
Yeah, here's something for you to listen to. I mean, it's like, have you ever done work and you're listening to something? It makes the time go by. So I'm imagining they just wanted people to sit there and be quiet.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we do a podcast. That's what people do. They listen to podcasts while they do other things. But It's just wild to me that they were doing that while people were working. That's I've never heard of that in any other situation. Hey, go make these car parts. We're going to read to you.
And 2, this job was usually reserved for men. But Luisa had quite a skill at reading that they hired her because she was very articulate. It was in this tobacco factory that Luisa came face to face with the severely disadvantaged. She saw the terrible working conditions, and she saw like what these people had to do on a daily basis for very, very little pay. And while being a reader, she read information to them secretly about unionizing. And she even snuck in some of her own handwritten essays, drawing attention from the workers of like, hey guys, you're being abused. Like, this is not okay.
That is sneaky, and I like it.
Yeah. So she got in contact with leaders of the labor movement, specifically the Federation of Tobacco Rollers and the Free Liberation Federation of Puerto Rican Workers. She reported what was happening in the tobacco factories, and she drew attention to the conditions that these people were working in. So they actually did have a few resources in place to protect these people. I just don't think that they knew how to access it. And people didn't really know what the next step should be. So Luisa decided, well, if you need a labor organizer, it can be me.
I never did it before, but I'll try.
So she organized a massive agricultural worker strike in 1905. She spoke openly that, yes, men were being oppressed, and that's not okay. But she was really disturbed about how the women were being treated in these factories. She witnessed a lot of how the female workers were being treated and abused. She drew attention that they were not getting equal pay. They were not getting an access to education. And also, like, there was working mothers there, working wives and single mothers, that it's like they would go to work, but then they had to have somebody watch their children. And so she was saying, you know, that shouldn't be a choice that they have to make of like stay at home and be destitute. If you're a single mother, you should be able to have the right to go and work and still be able to take care of your child.
She reminds me a lot of Lucia Sanchez Sarnillo, who
does.
was very similar.
In 1907, Luisa helped organize and participated in this massive strike in Arecibo's tobacco factories. She became an active member and leader in the Federation of Free Workers, and she also became a reporter for the Federation's newspaper. They started being able to distribute information out to people, right?
Oh my God, like their story is parallel. Now, if she becomes a lesbian, we've got like...
She even founded her own publication, which was called La Mujer, which means woman. A newspaper which addressed women's issues and the fight for the right to vote, because also women couldn't vote in Puerto Rico at this time. And she printed all the available resources on this too.
Remember, wasn't Lucia's group called like La Mujeres something? And I can't remember what it was.
It was like, wasn't it Revolution? Like,
yeah. Something like that, like the Revolutionary Women or the Women of the Revolution, something like that.
So in 1909, Luisa wrote and published a really controversial book called, and don't mind my really bad accent, it's Mi opinión sobre las libertades, derechos y deberes de la mujer, which means my opinion about my rights, liberties, and responsibilities of women. It included a very detailed critique of all the factories and how they treated women, and promoted equal education for all. And she also had this really radical belief that she published in there of free love.
Ooh.
Of being able to be, and taking her example from her parents of saying, we are in a relationship, but I am still independent of you. And they called it not adhering to social contracts, which is marriage, and being able to be with somebody, but still have a relationship with someone else, but still have that other relationship established and secure. And
so like free polyamory?
Yeah. So free love is like, come on, it's the early 1900s. I bet it freaked a lot of people out.
I'm sure that it freaked out a lot of people.
And so this writing that she wrote, it became the first feminist thesis written and published in Puerto Rico by a woman.
Awesome.
In 1912, Luisa pushed to apply pressure on the American companies. She knew it would take numbers, so she traveled to New York City, where she organized the Cuban and Puerto Rican tobacco workers there. Then she went to Tampa, Florida. She traveled to Cuba, and then she went to the Dominican Republic, where she helped join all the workers as a whole in a mass strike for their cause.
That's really fucking impressive.
And of course, like, this change doesn't happen overnight. It took years of protests and strikes and drawing attention, writing pamphlets, distributing information. So while in Cuba, Luisa attended a protest, but in this protest, she decided to wear a suit.
We've talked a lot about how women just were not allowed to wear pants.
Oh, no, she was arrested.
Ridiculous.
When she was charged in court, she was charged with being an agitator and purposely causing a scandal. She defended her actions by saying, "These clothes are just comfortable, and it's appropriate for a woman taking on roles outside the home." And then she added, "Oh yeah, it's justified on the grounds that this is my civil right to do so." So the court case was dismissed, which is surprising. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised that it was dismissed, but it's like, I just, obviously it should be someone's civil right to choose their clothing. Like, we shouldn't have
that it's even
such,
up for debate.
Yeah, I wonder if that judge basically was like, ding, ding, ding. Yeah, I guess you're right.
And this wasn't the only time that she was arrested. During a protest in Puerto Rico, she was wearing another suit. She was arrested and sent to jail for violence, disobedience, and being insubordinate to a police officer while wearing pants. Yes.
Insubordinate to a police officer while wearing pants.
So this officer is trying to arrest her, and obviously she's in the middle of a protest, and she physically put up a fight because she did not feel it was correct to arrest her. So then that's why they were saying she was violent. It was because she was physically resisting arrest.
Yeah, she was resisting arrest.
Yeah.
Cops, man.
So she's historically seen as the first woman to publicly wear pants in Puerto Rico. First one ever documented.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And after this arrest, another judge dropped the charges on her. Around this time, Luisa was about to see a huge break in their cause. So after years of protest, one of the largest ones that she helped organize was the sugar strike of 1916. So I'm pretty sure you're aware of like American interest in Cuba and Puerto Rico, the rights to the sugarcane fields, the import and export. It was a huge moneymaker. But basically the way that they ran these sugar fields was like, it was slavery.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was women and men and even children in these fields working in horrendous conditions, no breaks, in the hot, hot sun for fucking garbage pay.
And I've read somewhere that the actual harvesting of sugarcane is itself like a brutal work. Like it's difficult.
Physically taxing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're hunched over.
And it's like hard on the body, right? And you have to use machetes.
Yeah, my mom actually has hacked sugarcane, not as work, but it was to use it for the home. And I think I remember she said something about like my great grandmother sending her out to go get the sugarcane. And it's like, yeah, you use a machete, you bend the stalk over, you bend over and bend your knees, and then you hack the base and pull the sugarcane up. But imagine doing that
hard
for
on
18
the body.
hours.
Ridiculous, terrible work.
So Luisa helped 40,000 sugar industrial workers campaign and protest for 5 months. This protest went on. It's a long freaking time.
That's like the sit-ins, man. That's like a long time.
This was actually the largest strike and the longest strike documented in Puerto Rico's history. The protests turned close to riots. People were very angry. Tensions were boiling over. The government finally gave, And after the 5-month protest, it resulted in a national salary increase for laborers, and it established the first ever minimum wage law that was made in Puerto Rico.
Nice. I mean, they did something. I mean, it's always nice when those kinds of like bold moves actually bring about results.
A result, yeah. It also created a legacy within the history of a rise in the economic development and political organizing in Puerto Rico and Cuba at the time, because, I mean, we know what kind of happens in the 40s and 50s in Cuba. At this time, when this happened, Luisa was only 37 years old.
I need to get something done in the next year.
When I read that, because I was like, how old is she at this time? You know, this is a massive organization of 40,000 laborers, and she helps establish this law. And I was like, oh, she's 37. Whoa. I'm going to be 36 this year, y'all.
Yeah, I'm going to be 37 this summer and haven't accomplished that much yet.
Well, Luisa didn't stop there. She continued to help workers unionize and rally for women's rights. At a protest after the sugar strike, Luisa was leading a crowd on a horse, and she was in her suit, and she was giving like this crazy passionate speech, and the people were just like going nuts. And the police dragged her off the horse. People were, anti-strikers were throwing stuff at her, and they arrested her for almost inciting a riot because people were so worked up. So on the way to jail, people kept throwing stuff at her. The cops were shoving, hitting, pushing her. When she was in jail, they told her she had to pay a $400 fine. So her fellow protesters gathered all the money that they could, and they paid her fine, and they got her out. So she didn't have to stay in jail. Going into her 40s, Luisa fell ill with tuberculosis.
Oh,
and
no.
Almost to the very moment of her death, she kept fighting for workers' causes and the emancipation of women. She was even sick in bed, and she was still writing information to be distributed out to people. She died at the age of 42 in 1922. Ugh. She's so young.
So young.
Yeah. She was buried in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. I was actually kind of surprised I found this out, that her influence and her ability to rally people, it was slowly erased from history. Her memory and her contributions were almost lost. And most of the history books in Puerto Rico don't even mention her.
Really?
So the information that I found, it brought to light that it wasn't until 1990, a woman named Norma Valle Ferrer, she's a journalist, a writer, and a professor, she came across the story of Luisa Capetillo. Norma is a professor in the School of Communications at the University of Puerto Rico. She's also the director for Pro Women. It's an organization founded that focuses on the advancement of women's studies. So Norma decided to dive into Luisa's life. She dug up her writings. She ended up writing a book and multiple essays acknowledging and documenting Luisa's mark in history. And I don't know why her story was lost. Like, if people loved her so much, or if it was purposely.
It's got to be.
Out.
I mean, you know, the United States still has so much control in such awful ways. It would be great to erase somebody like that who was a rabble-rouser, who you wouldn't want that inspiration to live. Like, even today, when we talk about MLK in our country, we don't talk about what he was really fighting for, you know, which was like a takedown of the capitalist system. The Poor People's Campaign, which was his biggest, most ambitious, and the last campaign he worked on, was basically that, was to get everybody unionized, to take down the capitalist system, to establish social safety nets for everybody. And we don't talk about that. When we talk about Martin Luther King in our school books and on television and in our little like one-day platitudes about him, it's always about, I have a dream, and it's this like, you know, boys and girls holding hands, which he said in his speech, but like that was one speech over a whole young lifetime of really important work that was a lot more radical than white people especially want to give him credit for. And we white people need to do better, because that is not how we should remember our leaders. We should remember them as whole humans. And I think she was erased because those are radical ideas. Those are ideas that could take down systems.
She was actually too really outspoken about being against the church, which made a lot of people upset because, like she said, of those social contracts, she really thought it was foolish to put, all of your eggs in this basket when this person's trying to take advantage of you. And she also, like, a lot of men didn't want their wives to listen to her because they had control of the household. And when you're starting to talk about an equal household, it scared a lot of them. Like, she'd be out there rallying, and like men would like hold their women in the house because they didn't want them to go and listen to her speech.
That sounds about right, but it's really gross.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome.
Well, not done yet.
Oh, I thought you were like, she died. So I was like, oh, we're done.
Well, so Norma, this professor, yeah. She wrote this book, and the book is called Luisa Capetillo, Pioneer Puerto Rican Feminist. And the book was written with the help from Norma's graduate program at the University of Puerto Rico. So Luisa's story now has been written down and acknowledged in multiple books, and her story is not lost. And Norma is actually, she includes Luisa's story now in her, what do you call it? Her
like
teachings.
Her classes? Yeah.
In her classes. And so for it to be taught at the University of Puerto Rico, it's great that her story is still being told in her country. And so I got a little quote from Luisa to end on. She said, "I refuse to accept the assertion of any historian who erroneously believes that women have no right to use their freedom without being considered corrupt or immoral." She is a very passionate person, and I just love her, how hard she fought.
Yeah, she was like cinematic. You could just see her on that horse and wearing those pants.
And it's just the fact of the one thing that is so hard to do is to organize people who are struggling, because it's hard to focus and it's hard to get everybody to concentrate on one idea to how to pull themselves out.
I can't even imagine being able to do that right now. Like, to be able to get everybody to agree to strike.
No. Yeah.
I
don't think you could get that kind of number nowadays.
Yeah. I think it would be really hard, like, for instance, to get every single Amazon warehouse worker to strike at once.
Yeah.
Because it is a big sacrifice. When you strike, you don't get paid.
No. And the fact that she had that sugar strike for 5 months. Yeah,
that's 5 months of people being out of work and probably struggling to feed their families and things like that. Like, it is a huge sacrifice to strike. And we're so caught up in, our own self. Like, I have to take care of this for my family, to each his own type situation. I just don't think we could band together the same way that those kinds of strikes used to do, where you understood that your sacrifice is a sacrifice for the greater good.
Yep. She did an amazing job.
She did.
She has a story in Rejected Princesses, one of our favorite publications.
I love that little website. So cute.
I got more information from Backstory Radio, biography.com, Encyclopedia de Puerto Rico, Google Books on Amazon. That's where Norma's book is available if you want to purchase the story about Luisa. And I got a whole ton of information from a fantastic article in Teen Vogue, no less.
Ooh.
Called Puerto Rican Feminist by Araceli Cruz. Thank you, Araceli. Your article was fantastic. It had more information than Encyclopedia de Puerto Rico did. So I love that article. And I got a little bit from Wikipedia.
Excellent. I liked our really go-getting fighters. We had fighters today.
Yeah, we did.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for listening.
And we'd like to thank our editor, Lucas McIntyre.
and Jennifer Finch of L7 for our lovely theme music.
All right. Till next time, guys.
Thank you, everybody.